Now that we've converted our reactor core into a state machine, we can turn to the task of making it respond to the player's action. But you'll find that to do that, we're going to need to implement some relatively complicated pieces of functionality. Thankfully, Unity 3D isn't just a game engine. It's also the core of a vibrant development community full of developers willing to share their own solutions to the problems we all face. In this section, we'll look at some of Unity's included components and the asset store to find pre-built solutions to our problems, saving us a ton of time and effort. Let's get to it. Our first problem is that we have no way to detect if anything has been clicked. We have no way to tell our reactor core to change state, essentially. To address that, we'll need to add a Mesh Collider component to our reactor core prefab. A Mesh Collider is a component that allows a 3D model to detect mouse presses or when another game model comes in contact with it, or collides with it. First, select the reactor core component prefab, and then click on the component menu. Finally, select Mesh Collider from the Physics submenu. With the Mesh Collider in place, we'll be able to make our reactors trap player input and respond, but we'll get to that in a later section. You can also look into using a box or a Capsule Collider instead of the Mesh Collider, where a Mesh Collider gives you a perfect fit, that is, where it ensures you can only click or collide with what you actually see from the game model. It comes at a high performance cost. A Capsule or a Box Collider might do the job just as well and bring with it a savings in performance. Yes, you might technically be able to click on an empty space right next to the model and have it register a hit, but the difference in performance is totally worth it in most cases. That said, Unity's physics engine is actually pretty robust, and so for what we're doing, using a Mesh Collider isn't really going to be a problem. In fact, when you get ready to work on more complex games, come back to the Components menu and have a look at the stuff that's in there. A lot of what I used to consider hard is now mostly done for you with all of these pre-built components. But before you go off and poke around, I'd like to introduce you to the Asset Store. So first click on the Window menu, and then select Asset Store. Just as you've written a custom component for your game, many other developers using Unity have written their own routines, composed their own music, or modeled their own 3D assets. The Asset Store is a place where these developers have put their work up for sale. Don't worry, we won't be requiring anything from the Asset Store for this course, but it is worth looking at. There are easier ways to do just about everything we're going to be showing you from here on out, and most of them are available here for very little money. In fact, if you notice this bar on the right here, you can go down to Top Free, and you can see a list of the most popular free assets that are available in the store. And as you can see, sometimes they're scripts like controllers. This is for allowing you to control a character in an MMO. Sometimes they're assets like the models needed to build a 3D village. And sometimes they're even whole games like this complete project tutorial for building a car game. Basically, if you ever get stuck, have a look around the asset store to see if there's a solution available. If you can't find one in the asset store, that's when it's time to hit Google. Alright, we've taken a look at Unity's built-in components, and we've used it to add a Mesh Collider to our reactor core prefab, which in turn automatically added it to all of our reactor cores in our scene. Then we went one further and we took a look at the Asset Store, a community market of pre-built assets, components, and audio offered for sale by fellow developers. Now when you're stuck, you'll have a place to look for potential solutions, many of which are free and most of which are incredibly inexpensive. Next, we'll use the functionality added by the Mesh Collider to trap player input and make our game start to play like a real game. Good luck!